Buddy. Before we begin, Chuck, would you lead us in a word of prayer this evening?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time and this place that we can come together and be with each other and open the pages of your word. Pray that we can look in your word with open minds and learn the things that you have prepared there for us. Pray that you'll be with all the teachers that are here today and all the students also, that we can all learn more about you. Most of all, we thank you. Most of all, we thank you for Jesus. For his name we pray.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm going to scoot up here since I won't be in anybody's face. I'm glad y'all could make it tonight. I'm so glad that the snow is gone. We might need a boat to get to church on Sunday. Some of y'all might have needed one tonight, but it's good to be back. I believe we finished in just barely into chapter 26, if I recall correctly. Even if we did read a little bit of it, I don't think that we discussed it a whole lot. So I believe 26 and 8 is about where we are. The chief priests are plotting to kill Jesus, and now we have this scene that is also present in John chapter 12, and Jesus is anointed here at Bethany. Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in this house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." In John chapter 12, it clarifies that this woman is Mary, the sister of Lazarus and Martha. What sticks out to us about this passage? I know John had a question on Sunday. He said, "He's a leper." Did you think about it anymore, John? You have a toddler. Uh, if he must have been cured, otherwise Jesus wouldn't have been able to be there. Based on Leviticus 13, unless somebody is cured, he couldn't have been around him. He would have been unclean. And if you remember, go ahead. Well, they're not in Lazarus' house, though. They're in Simon's house. Yeah. I thought the same thing the first time I read it, too, so you're all good. Um, if you remember, and this has been 2 months ago, we had the discussion about lots of things were called leprosy that weren't necessarily leprosy like we think of. So, maybe Jesus healed him and it was leprosy, or maybe he had any number of other skin conditions that at one point he was a leper and now he was cured of. There's no way of knowing, but we can infer that he was cured at the time. Otherwise, the disciples wouldn't have been there. Did you have something, Chris? John gives us a little more insight into that part of the story. John, in verses 4 through 6 of chapter 12, it reveals that Judas was, of course, the one that said this, and did covet money, as Chris said, and that he was taken out of the money bag, that he was a thief. His heart was corrupted by his greed, and he certainly was not seeing clearly the world ahead of him. Go ahead.
It's a big problem in our world today. There's a lot of people that claim to like be do-gooders to the poor. They want money for their charities or whatever, but they're sticking a hand, and put some in their back pocket. Big problem.
Yeah,
A lot of money.
there's, and there, we could have a big long discussion about that, about how people tax shelter and call it their ministry. Yes, it's a big mess that people use to pretty much extort people's good intentions. What sticks out to us about Mary? Didn't y'all have anything you thought about Mary that? Well, I'll tell you what I think, and y'all tell me if I'm wrong. It seems to me that Mary's got a better understanding of what's about to happen and what's going on than the disciples do. She gets it. Martha isn't getting it because Martha's mad because Mary's not helping. You know, we read that in John. The disciples are like, why is she wasting all the, I mean, yes, Judas said it, but you don't see any kind of passage about somebody saying, no, let her do it. They might not have been as active in what they were saying, but they were certainly passive in rebuking him. She seems to get it, and Jesus confirms that. That she's preparing him for his burial to come. And, yeah. Yeah, we read there. Yeah, I think we're up to about a half a dozen real plain instances of Jesus saying that now. Just over and over again. They're human though. And today, and I don't think we'll get to the part that I was talking with Greg and Chris about, but we'll get there Sunday. A lot of these things, we read them, and we read them like stories. Or we, read them and think of maybe the Apostle Peter or the Apostle John in 1st and 2nd Peter and 1st and 2nd and 3rd John in Revelation. And we're not realizing, or maybe not always calling it to remembrance, that this is before they had the Helper to come. They were Jesus' disciples. They followed him, but they still just didn't have all the pieces put together yet. They had a measure of faith, but their faith had not been, fully built up. And they just didn't get it. And they were every bit as fallible as you or I. And, they dropped the ball over and over again. But Mary, yes, she is to be commended, and as Jesus' prophecy is read today, her memory is being proclaimed about what she did. A very, very expensive bottle of perfume. I think John says that they said, it could be sold for 300 denarii, so something like a year's worth of salary. So we're talking about a very expensive bottle of anointing oil. Anything else about this before we move on a little bit further? 14 through 16, yeah. What, what's the King's Bible say over there, Jonathan? That's what you got in front of you. Yeah. So yeah. That he told him that he was going to die and then said that it was good news that needed to be proclaimed everywhere. Yeah. Certainly. You know, and I would say that it probably went over their head like a lot of the stuff that Jesus has said to this point has. Where they kind of get it, but they don't quite get it. And they won't until he is dead and raised again. Do you have something, Jeff? Okay. Let's go ahead and read just 14. Or no, go ahead. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, great things. I believe we're talking about the same instance, are we not? Yeah. Because Mary, she pours it on him and wipes his feet with her hair. And yeah, they had a lot to say about it. People did. But, you know, and think about Mary's perspective, because if you've read John as well, Jesus has just raised her brother from the dead. And she's been listening. She understands, or at least appears to understand, what he's telling him, that he's about to die. And I will say this too, this might be a good example of how sometimes women are better at certain things than men. Because a lot of times when it comes to something that is a problem, I know that my wife, a lot of times she just wants to listen about it, figure out what's going on, hear it. And me, I'm already thinking about how to fix it. And sometimes when we get in that, how am I going to fix this, we kind of delay the understanding of, no, it's happening. So just maybe some human perspective there. All right, let's go ahead and read in verse 13 through 25. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now on the first day of the unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at the table with the 12, and they were eating. He said, "Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, "Is it I, Lord?" And he answered, "He who dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man whom the Son of Man has betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born." Judas, who would betray him, answered, "Is it I, Rabbi?" And he said to him, "You have said so." So what do y'all think about this? What do we know about Judas? We've mentioned that he was a thief, that he loved money, that he was greedy, but what are the things that we know about him from what we know about the text of the Bible? Maybe so. But Jesus knows what he's going to do. Judas had been with Jesus for how long now? Yeah, 2.5, 3 years. He had witnessed the Son of God in the flesh, raising the dead, healing the sick, confirming prophecies, preaching, doing every single thing that he did. He had been granted some measure of power because Jesus, of course, told his disciples to go and heal people and do things. He knew exactly who he was betraying and that he was betraying someone who was unlike anyone else that had ever existed. And he did it for 30 pieces of silver. To the very people that he has heard Jesus time and time and time and again preach against. And he went to them. And, of course, most of us have probably, at least at one point in our life, seen the picture of the Last Supper, the Michelangelo painting, how they kind of were reclined around the table, and that was more the style of how they ate. They don't eat like us at their table with their fork and knife. And that's a pretty intimate setting. These were close people, dipping their food in the same bowl. Judas, knowing he had betrayed Jesus, looked him in the face and said, "Is it I, Lord?" I mean, there was certainly something wrong with that man's heart. I mean, think last on Sunday, I think we talked about kind of the anguish of knowing what we know and then being lost. Can you imagine being Judas? In torment for all eternity, knowing I'm the one that delivered the Son of God to die. That's the choice he made. And he very likely could have, yeah. So, we also see that this is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it is the Thursday evening, the 14th day of Nisan, or Nisan, that they are having the Passover, what was one of the things that they ate on the Passover feast? You kind of have some symbolism here. The unblemished lamb, the best one they had. And that is the feast that they are eating at this time. And it is from this point here, this Thursday evening, that Pentecost is 50 days after this. So the events that we read about in Acts chapter 2 is 50 days from now in our timeline. So Jesus confirms that Judas is the betrayer. And then he institutes his supper. He says, "Now as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, 'Take, eat, this is my body.' And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, 'Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you that I will not drink again of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom.'" We've read this or one of its mirror passages well, if you've been in church very long, you've probably heard it at least 500 times. What sticks out to us, though? What's maybe something you noticed different this time? He says, "For this is the blood of the covenant." Well, Jonathan, we talked the other night about all the Hebrews connections. In Hebrews chapter 9, we read of how for a covenant to be and to hold value, what had to happen? Someone had to die. Yes, this is his covenant. And he pours it out for many for the forgiveness of sins. If you remember all the way back, first class, in Matthew 1 and 21, the angel told Joseph, where am I? Yeah. "And she will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." And if you wanted to, if you really like to get into word discussion, you might want to circle the word "for." Because the word "for the forgiveness of sins" and the phrasing used here that Jesus uses is the exact same phrase that Peter will use on the day of Pentecost when he says, "Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins." And there has been quite a lot of debate over the years about that by different individuals and different groups and things, but that's one of those things that linguistically, in order to say that baptism is not essential, you have to be able to justify that, or you should, you have to find a way to rationalize how If Jesus said this and then Peter said that, and it's the same thing, why don't I have to do it? So that's certainly something. There's books on that, so that's not a discussion to hammer out too much tonight. Go ahead. Oddly enough, in my mark, but I've got it handwritten. I'm going to read it out of my phone just so I can read it a little bit more clearly. I have Colossians 1:19 and 20, because that is where my brain went when I read through this time. For it was the Father's good pleasure for all the fullness to dwell in him, and through him to reconcile all things to himself, having made peace through the blood of his cross. And through him, I say, whether things on earth or things in heaven. His death and his burial and his resurrection and overcoming death. Paul references it here. The book of Hebrews is about all the things that make Christ so much better. And truly, the opportunity and the privilege that we have to partake of his supper and be called his brother is the greatest honor we could ever have. What about verse 29? I tell you that I will not drink of the fruit of vine again until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. What does he mean? So what's his kingdom? What's it? Are we talking about the kingdom of heaven, or well, are we talking about the kingdom that is being established in the present moment in the text, or are we talking about heaven, the eternal kingdom? Well, I don't enough to die on a hill either, so I'm not going to. From I'm with you on that one. Best I can piece together from people smarter than me, and since when we've talked about the kingdom every other time, he has been referring to the kingdom is at hand. I would lean toward this being a reference to the church. And if that is what he's talking about, when we partake of the fruit of the vine, when we partake of the bread, who are we in fellowship with? Christ. And so, in that sense, in the sense of we are His and we are in fellowship with Him, we are having that with Him in His Father's kingdom. That's yes. Come share the Lord is the song you're thinking of. All right. Well, let's move on to verse 30. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives, and then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee." And Peter answered him, "Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away." And Jesus said to him, "Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said to him, "Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you." And all the disciples said the same. I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. Anybody know where that's from? Good get. Yeah, it's Zechariah chapter 13 and verse 7. And that, of course, is what we know to be the case that happens. Peter was a confident man, wasn't he? A little bit. I wish I could tell you that it gets better as she gets older, but you ain't going to sleep for a long time. I don't think Shane slept yet. No. Have you slept yet, Chuck? Do you finally get to sleep? If Nancy runs over me in the parking lot. But I don't think we ever quit worrying about our kids. Doesn't matter whether they're 2 or 82, if we're still living. They abandoned Jesus. Every last one of them does. He knew it was going to happen. And this is just another subtle instance of Jesus unquestionably verifying that He is the Son of God and He is special beyond what anybody else is. He told them exactly what they were going to do. They were in complete denial of it, and He knew they were going to do it anyway. Peter said, "I'd rather die." Go ahead, Chris. it could perhaps be referencing that event too. So you might very well be more right than I was. I and I you know a lot of the things that Jesus has said in these verses and passages that we've studied, it meant something then, and it meant something after he died, and it means something today, and it means something forever because his words don't pass away. So the same as some of the prophecies from the Old Testament. Here they meant one thing to Israel and Judah, and then here they also meant something right here and now, and then we understand them. When we think about, Jonathan's been talking about apologetics, and to make the scriptures, even in figurative language, so compelling that you're like, well, it applies to this and this and this, and things like this to where it can mean any of them, and it's not, it fits. And I don't see how that's just an accident. That's kind of a compelling thing. That's our kingdom. Yeah, that's his kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is at hand that we've been reading about. And of course, a lot more of Jesus' final discourse and words of encouragement to his disciples is found in the book of John. Chapters 14 through 16 is going to be a lot of his last words of comfort that he would have given about this time. And then now we go to Gethsemane. And then Jesus went with them to the place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled, and he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little further, he fell on his face and he prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for the second time, he went away and he prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and he prayed for the third time, saying the same words again. And then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." We sing a lot of songs about this event. Oh, a beautiful prayer. I don't think we have the song that I'm thinking of, Gethsemane, in our books, but a lot of the songs focus on this event. A lot of people think of Luke chapter 22 and verse 34, where it tells us that as he was praying, his sweat drops became as blood. Whether that was metaphorical in the writing and it was as if he was bleeding because he was sweating, or whether it was the medical phenomenon of hematidrosis, when you are in such utter anguish, stress, and shock that your capillaries in your skin burst and you literally sweat blood. I don't know. Yeah. He was the Son of God, and he was a man. Everything that he had done in his entire life, this was the tipping point of it. Everything. He knew that when the moment he stepped foot out of that garden, he was going to be delivered to die. He had just looked his disciples in the face, told them, y'all are going to scatter. No, I'm not going to. We're with you. He knew they weren't. He left the 8 on the outside and took the 3 with him to the inner garden and then said, just wait here, I'm going to go ahead and pray. He prays and he comes back, and the 3 that he loved the most, they're asleep. Couldn't you just stay watch for an hour? He goes back and prays again. They're asleep again. And when it says their eyes were heavy, I know that sleep. I've been that sleep. It's when you're trying to stay awake for something, but you just can't keep your eyes open. And he goes a 3rd time and comes back. The thing that I'll share with y'all, we did get to where I thought we might. With Jesus knowing what is to come and having gone through what he just did with Judas making a mockery of the Lord's Supper as he was instituting it, plotting against him, his disciples writing checks he knew they couldn't cash, and knowing that he was about to be killed for the sins of the whole world. I don't know about y'all, but the thing that struck me about this today is, of all the times for there to be a temptation, think about it. If you all told 3 of your friends, hey, wait right here and keep watch, and you came back and they was sleeping, and you knew you had to do something that was going to cost you everything, and it was going to benefit everybody, and then they're asleep. How many of y'all going to be mad? We all going to be mad. He's not mad. He just prays. His impulse, instead of the very human tendency to respond with anger and rage and frustration, he turns to God in prayer, knowing that the cup could not pass for him, but expressing his great despair at having to drink it. And he was God, so not only did he know the sins of them, he knew the sins of all. Does anybody have anything they want to say before we go ahead, Chris? Yeah. There's not many times that I'll say I guarantee you something, but I guarantee that none of us will ever experience disappointment like Jesus did that night. And he did it without sin, and he did it without anger, and he did it without wrath. Thank y'all.
Still waiting on a few people to get their seats. Good evening. It's good to see you all here. It's a good chance for us to come together, study God's Word, recharge for the rest of the week, and focus on spiritual things. First song we'll sing is number 406, More About Jesus. I was waiting for Bruce to change the slide so I would know the key it was in. No, so more about Jesus would I know, more of his grace to others show, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus let me learn, more of his holy will discern. Spirit of God my teacher be, showing the things of Christ to me. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus in his word, holding communion with my Lord, hearing his voice in every line, making each faithful saying mine. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me. More about Jesus on his throne, riches and glory all his own, more of his kingdom sure increase, more of his coming Prince of Peace. More about Jesus, more about Jesus, more of his saving fullness see, more of his love who died for me.
If you're going to follow along, you want to open your Bibles to Revelation 21. Revelation chapter 21. I'm going to read the first few verses here to start out. Revelation 21, starting in verse 1. I'll be reading from the English Standard Version. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them and will be with his people, and they will be his people. And God himself will be there with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. These words, along with several others, have been on my mind this week particularly, but over the past few weeks, and a lot of other scriptures that kind of pertain to the same subject. This week, I'm not going to say it's been tough, it's just kind of hit me a little bit harder. Some things, people that we know that things have happened to over the last week and couple weeks. Lauren and I went to a friend's sister's funeral, 36 years old, got sick, got the flu, turned into pneumonia. She died, been married for 6 months, 36 years old, a Christian up at Rutherford. That was about 2.5 weeks ago. And then this week, one of our friends from Little Rock, that she had cancer, went into remission, came back, and had made it to her brain, and it was so aggressive they decided not to do treatment. They found that out in October, and she passed away yesterday. And she leaves a 18-year-old freshman at the University of Arkansas and a 16-year-old girl in high school, and a husband who's an elder at the church there. So then there's that part of it. There's death, but then there's also injustice, right? Again, yesterday at lunchtime was filled with events. I was with a colleague. We were in Jonesboro. We left eating lunch and we're pulling out. And he's an older gentleman, got grandkids, a very good guy in the sense of the world. And it was kind of drizzling, kind of like it's been doing here. And looked over and I was like, look at that right there. Is that somebody carrying a child down the side of Red Wolf Boulevard? 4-lane, 5-lane highway and it's pouring, or not pouring down rain, but it's raining. It's like, let's wait and see. He said, yeah, let's wait and see, Well, they get up there and we're like, hey, y'all need a ride? And he said, yeah, we do. Trying to get down here to the Dollar Tree. Well, I know Jonesboro, but I don't. Dollar Tree was probably another mile down Red Wolf Boulevard towards the school. Jessica probably knows where the Dollar Tree is. And he was telling us on the way down there, he's like, he had his little girl. She was probably 4. She had a blemish on her face, and he was trying to get some medicine for it. He was going to the Dollar Tree to try to get his medicine. He said, I got like $2 to my name. We're staying in this hotel down here. My car's been repoed. We've lost everything. And, we helped him in his case right there. But that's not, my point's not necessarily about helping people physically as much as focusing on the fact that we have a kingdom to go to where everybody is taken care of, where nothing physical matters, where we can share a free gift of the gospel and of salvation that costs nothing more than obedience to people in cases where we can do that and we have the opportunity. And I want to finish reading this because it continues in a similar theme of what we're looking forward to. So continuing in chapter 21, verse 5. And he who is seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. Also he said, Write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give them a spring of the water of life without payment. The one who conquers will have this heritage, and it will be his God, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexual immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with the fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Those are the options. That's it. And I'm pretty sure that all of us want to be in the first option, right? We want to be in the place that's not fire and hell and brimstone, and we have to keep our mind on that goal. For some of us, it's a lot closer than others, and we don't know which ones it's closer for. And being the best Christian we can be for ourselves, but for everybody else too, because we've got people all around us that we can help in many, many ways. So I wanted to leave that with you tonight, because as we studied in class on Sunday, there's going to be the sheep and the goats. I sure hope I'm doing my best to be in the sheep category. And this talk tonight is as much for me as it is for anybody, but I want to leave you with those words. If we can help you tonight in any way, come forward as we stand and as we sing.
It won't be very long till this short life shall end. It won't be very long till Jesus shall descend, and then the dead in Christ
Good to see everyone out tonight. Thank you for being here. Thanks to John for those words. Very heartfelt and very encouraging, I think, for us to think about. Thank you so much, John. Just a couple announcements before we're dismissed.